Oh my God.
Hey, what is enlightenment?
Oh, that was my enlightenment for today.
What? What do you want? You know what enlightenment is? I'm a little busy right now.
That's a tough question.
I have been waiting for someone to ask me this question my entire life. Everyone is already enlightened. Most just aren't aware of it yet. The path to how someone becomes aware that they're enlightened is this. You're contemplating the nature of existence when suddenly the most sane thing imaginable happens. You stumble into the truth of who you are. You realize you are God. Not some idea of God, not a character in a story, but the entire creative force of life itself. Your perspective shifts from being a single person to being everyone and everything all at once. Your body still moves, talks, and acts just like before, but it no longer feels like you are doing it. Instead, you are this vast field of consciousness, experiencing the whole of life as a seamless flow. Every moment feels brand new, as if you're being reborn every second. Life unfolds as if it's the first time every time. Even walking downstairs becomes a miracle. Playing sports, you feel the movement of every player as your own. You forget which team you're on, and yet the body still moves with perfect grace, part of the dance of consciousness. It strikes you with the weight of absolute truth. Your entire life up until now feels like a dream, an illusion, and for the first time, you are awake. The most startling revelation is that you don't actually exist. The you you've been protecting, promoting, and suffering over was only ever an idea. What remains is pure weightlessness, effortless flow. Flow isn't something you generate, it's the natural way of being when there is no self. And in this flow, the bliss of simply being eclipses every human definition of satisfaction. Nothing you've ever achieved, owned, or desired compares to the joy of existing as you truly are. What you don't yet realize is that this awakening is not the end. It is the beginning of the most transformative and most demanding journey you will ever take. Whether you think of yourself as spiritual or not, this realization will change everything, and it will be the hardest thing you ever do. How does awakening happen? You don't know. No one knows. You never even imagined it was possible. At first you wonder, is this some sort of altered state? But no, it's so clear, so undeniable, that you realize this is how life really is. Everything else was the altered state. Anyways, there is no self. From direct experience, this is obvious. Beyond debate, beyond a doubt. How one comes to see this is a mystery. Something interrupts the habitual pattern of self-identification. It could be a near-death experience, a meditation breakthrough, a car accident, or maybe even a psychedelic trip. But in the end, the trigger doesn't matter. What matters is the glimpse itself. And once you've seen it, you can't unsee it. You're hooked. There's no turning back. From now on, nothing less than the full truth of who you are will satisfy. And yet, as much as you want to hold on to this experience of awakening, it fades. It may linger for hours or days, even months, but eventually self-identification seems to return. And the more you try to cling to the truth, the faster it slips away. Because what you are cannot be possessed. It cannot be grasped. And here's the good news. It also can't be lost. The truth of what you are remains true whether or not you're conscious of it. In this sense, everyone is already enlightened. Most just aren't aware of it yet. For some, a glimpse is too much. They quietly turn away, choosing to return to the comfort of ordinary life. This is totally understandable. Infinity can be terrifying. But for others, nothing else will ever be enough again. The truth has taken root, and only more truth will do. One way or another, after one has had an awakening, life will never be the same again. At first, it feels like you've cracked the code of existence. You're soaring, quoting mystics at dinner parties, telling anyone who will listen, we are all one. For a while, it feels effortless, radiant, obvious, but then life seeps back in. Bills arrive, your neighbor blasts music at 3 a.m., your boss emails you during dinner, and suddenly you realize maybe you're not quite as enlightened as you thought.
This is where many people stall out. They cling to that first glimpse of the truth, building an identity around it.
They become rigid, even fundamentalist. I've seen the truth, they think, and the rest of you are still asleep. It's normal, but it's also another illusion. Now that you've awakened, you start constructing a new framework to live in. You reinterpret everything through this lens. Conversations bore you unless they circle back to the truth. Friends and family may not understand, and you may not care. You know what you know. Why look to anyone else for authority when you yourself are God, the creative force of life itself? Your preferences change, your relationships shift. You may seek out spiritual groups or teachers drawn to people who speak your language. You feel there's a correct way to describe reality, and everything else, politics, gossip, social drama, seems like wasted energy in a world built on illusions. A subtle sense of superiority creeps in, and it feels justified. After all, while others are stuck in trivial games, you're contemplating the meaning of existence. Surely this path is more profound, more real, maybe even better. And yet, this too is part of the spiritual hangover. The illusion is not finished with you. At some point, the high of the initial awakening wears off. The bliss fades. The novelty of mystical experiences dulls. If you're lucky, even the fireworks become sort of ordinary. It's frustrating. You meditate, you pay closer attention, and sometimes clarity returns. You touch pure consciousness again, free and spacious, but just as quickly you're sucked back into separation. It can feel like being dragged out of heaven and hurled straight back into hell, over and over again. You may even feel more sensitive than ever. Annoying people now annoy you more. Old insecurities sting sharper. It's as if the light of consciousness has shined directly onto your human conditioning, magnifying every detail.
Ooh, is this thing still on? It looks like the light is blinking. Anyways, the infinite lightness of being throws the weight of all your habits, fears, and attachments into this painful relief. And here's the hard truth. This is where awakening stops being fun. This is the dark night of the soul. Awakening doesn't hand you coping strategies. It doesn't say, here's how to manage your triggers. It simply says, face them, all of them. Old wounds resurface. Childhood traumas you thought were buried come back alive. Relationships begin to strain as your patterns are exposed. At work, ambitions that once drove you feel meaningless, yet letting them go feels terrifying. Your very identity is being dismantled, and there is nowhere to hide. From a broader perspective, though, you're doing exactly what you're supposed to. Spirit is cleansing you, knot by knot, belief by belief. A deep purification is underway, even if it feels like chaos. And it's not quick. This stage can take years, sometimes decades. This is probably where sayings like, "it takes multiple lifetimes to get enlightened," come from. Because to move forward, every corner of your being must come out of hiding. Every belief and every attachment has to be brought into the light of presence, to be seen and sat with fully. Teachers and therapists can help, but no single method works for everything. Some parts of conditioning let go easily, but others are stubborn. They require immense patience and attention before they dissolve. A former Marine once described this emotional work as the hardest thing he had ever done. Harder than boot camp, harder than combat training. This is the crucible of awakening. This is where illusions die hard.
It's exhausting, frustrating, and often unbearable. But every time you sit with your pain instead of running, every time you face a fear instead of hiding, something loosens. The grip of the false self weakens.
Applaud yourself for every small victory here, because the truth is, you would have had to face this material sooner or later anyways. The difference is, now it's not buried. Now it's coming into the light.
And though it feels impossible at times, this is how awakening deepens. The fire burns away everything that is not true until only truth remains. At some point along the path, presence becomes too powerful to ignore. The gravitational pull of awareness is so strong that your identity shifts permanently into the deeper understanding of who you are. What triggers this shift? That remains a mystery. But in hindsight, it makes perfect sense. At a certain point, illusion just simply stops working. It can no longer pull you fully back into the trance of being just a person. This is one of the most profound shifts in consciousness, and it's here that the journey begins to feel truly sweet. A much clearer picture of reality is now available. Life feels fuller, more effortless. Before this shift, it took tremendous effort to be present. But now, presence feels like the baseline of existence, as if presence is all you ever were. Instead of straining to reach awareness, it now feels like awareness is your starting point, and human conditioning occasionally pulls you away. Interestingly, the process of dealing with human conditioning doesn't change all that much. You still have to deal with what arises: old wounds, limiting beliefs, attachments. But now you have a far greater capacity to sit with it. In fact, in many ways, this is where the spiritual journey really begins. Healing becomes much more spacious. Human conditioning still arises, but you no longer need it to disappear in order to feel satisfied. You identify with the space in which it arises, not the content itself. And there's a profound gratification to simply being the space of awareness. Everyday life now carries a kind of magic. The ordinary shimmers. You feel more intimate with life and others. You perceive clearly that we are all one, and your interactions have a depth and warmth that wasn't there before. And as your awareness grows, you begin to sense that you're no longer working with just your conditioning. You're giving space to the conditioning of the collective itself. Issues that humanity is wrestling with, fear, division, grief, arise within you, and you offer them your presence. Whether it's yours or not doesn't really matter. What matters is that it all longs for love, for light, for release, and you are willing to bring it. Eventually, another realization dawns. You begin to see that everything, absolutely everything, is made of the same presence you are. What once felt like two, the awareness that is our essence and the illusory human form, are now seen as one. Form and formless are no longer separate. Spirit and matter are the same. Logically, it makes no sense, but experientially, it's undeniable. Life reveals itself as energy, as consciousness, as matter and spirit intertwined. Some would call stage 4 the final step, but stage 5 reveals that enlightenment isn't a final step at all. It's an infinite unfolding. And the flavor of this unfolding is sweetness. A wondrous ease infuses every moment. Even human suffering is no longer an enemy. It is seen as part of the whole, another current in the great ocean of consciousness. At this stage, you almost welcome your buttons being pushed. Why? Because each trigger is an opportunity to liberate more conditioning back into pure presence. Every challenge becomes fuel for freedom. Life feels effortless here. Things seem to happen by themselves. Action flows without resistance. There's a saying, you can tell a Zen master by how he drinks his tea. In this stage, you understand why. Even the simplest gestures, a sip of tea, a walk in the garden, a quiet smile, are infused with the fullness of being. And yet, this stage isn't about withdrawing from life. Quite the opposite. With this ease comes an immense capacity to sit with humanity's deepest wounds. You're able to sit with suffering. Yours, others, the world's, it doesn't matter. If your deepest wish is to serve the world, this is the path. There's another saying, if you want to know how enlightened a teacher is, ask their spouse. Enlightenment doesn't mean perfection. It doesn't mean a flawless human. If anything, enlightenment gives permission to be fully human, to laugh, to stumble, to grieve, to celebrate, to make mistakes without shame or denial. Yes, there will always be critics who say, that person can't be enlightened, they did this or that. But those arguments miss the point. Enlightenment isn't about fitting a moral checklist. It's about the truth of consciousness, and that truth can only be discovered directly. Talking about it is useful only up to a point. Without direct experience, it will always be misunderstood. And perhaps these stages are not fixed. Some may feel permanent, but who's to say what comes next? Consciousness may evolve in ways we can't yet imagine. Perhaps whole communities will awaken together. Perhaps humanity as a whole can shift. The one thing that seems clear is that awakening is an ongoing, infinite unfolding. So wherever you are in the process, remember this. The ride itself is the point. Each stage, each struggle, each joy, it's all part of the great dance of being.
Hey, where are you going? I was actually just getting started. I got a lot more to say here.